I want to tell you a little bit about the current situation with nuclear technology here in Australia. The first thing to tell you is that Australia prohibits the use of nuclear energy. Under Section 140A of our Environmental Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act, a minister must not approve one of several things, all of them nuclear, one of them a nuclear power station. That's a curious position for Australia to be in. Firstly, nuclear energy today is used in over 30 nations, and 19 out of 20 G20 nations either use nuclear power now or are very actively planning and preparing to use nuclear power in the near future. Australia does not. Secondly, Australia is very much a nuclear nation. We have operated 3 nuclear reactors, including now the Opal research reactor at Lucas Heights in Sydney. That's one of the world's most important facilities for the production of radioisotopes, which is medicine, important life-saving medicine. Thirdly, and perhaps strangest of all, we mine and sell uranium to the rest of the world. We are the 3rd largest supplier of uranium to the global market, and we have the largest known deposits of uranium. Australia is a key player in the global nuclear cycle. And the energy in our uranium that we export every year is equivalent to Australia's total annual domestic electricity consumption without greenhouse gas emissions. That's how much clean energy we're exporting in the form of uranium oxide fuel and declining to use. How could we have developed a situation of such startling hypocrisy? How could we sell the fuel for a technology we ban? In my experience, nothing brings clarity to issues like standing back and taking a bigger look for some broader perspective. So on that note, welcome to Australia. And welcome indeed to Brisbane, a beautiful, thriving, modern metropolis. There's a little bit of a catch to the beauty of Brisbane though, and that's this. At 820 grams of carbon dioxide per kilowatt hour, we will be spending this week enjoying our time with one of the dirtiest electricity supplies in the world. Not the dirtiest, however. For that, we need to visit our next location. Let's visit the Loy Yang Power Station in Victoria. This brown coal power station is responsible for 19 million tonnes of CO2 per year. As a single point source, 19 million tonnes of CO2 per year. And the electricity comes for a whopping 1,180 grams of greenhouse gas emissions per kilowatt hour. In the fight against climate change, places like Loy Yang are ground zero. If we aren't succeeding in driving plants like that out of our economies, we aren't succeeding at all. It's that simple. Follow the rail line. This 2,200 megawatt plant needs fuel, of course. The Loy Yang coal mine, where 30 million tonnes of brown coal are dug every year. That's quite a hole in the ground. If we come in a little closer, what we can see are the machines simply raking away strip after strip of land. Never to grow trees, never to host biodiversity, never to grow food. Just sacrificed in our addiction to coal. Now, there are other energy mines in Australia, of course. So let's visit a different energy mine. Let's now visit the Beverley uranium mine in my home state of South Australia. It's in a beautiful location right at the foot of the Flinders Ranges near Arkaroola, and it's absolutely teeming with wildlife. This mine, for 400 tonnes of uranium oxide per year, produces over half the energy of the 30 million tonnes of brown coal from the Loy Yang power station. And they don't even need to dig. They don't even need to remove topsoil. The incredible energy density of uranium makes it a wonderfully efficient mineral, and efficiency is good. There's no power plant here, of course. There can't be, because we're not allowed to use them. So this uranium's going somewhere else. The Qinshan nuclear power stations in China. These 2 small nuclear reactors, perched on a compact bit of land, can provide around 11 million megawatt hours of electricity per year with no greenhouse gas emissions, no particulate emissions, no emissions. Because it's not combustion. We're not burning anything. It's fission. Fission's different. The The uranium from Beverley may find its way in future to the Sandman nuclear development. Now here's a larger nuclear development. When it's complete, this is going to provide about 35 million megawatt hours of electricity per year with no greenhouse gas emissions. If that was being delivered by China using brown coal, it would be another 40 million tonnes of greenhouse gas emissions per year. So make no mistake, every one of these nuclear power plants that is being built is a coal-fired power station that isn't. Nuclear technology is the primary zero-carbon competing source of electricity for coal. Always has been and remains that. Of course, around about now, I expect maybe you're wanting to ask me a little bit about spent nuclear fuel and radioactive waste. Fair question. Let's go and have a look at some. In the mid-90s, the Connecticut Yankee Power Station was decommissioned. And here, what you can see is the entire load of spent fuel from 28 years of operations. That produced in its lifetime, from a small nuclear reactor, 110 million megawatt hours of electricity with no greenhouse gas emissions. And that's every bit of fuel that was required to do it is sitting there in storage, quietly, happily, causing no one any problems. And I'm sure you'll agree that that's a pretty small facility. Let's just have a look at it in the context of the landscape. It's a pretty place, Connecticut, surrounded by state parks. What you see there, that is the source of decades of anti-nuclear fear-mongering on the basis of spent nuclear fuel. That's it. That's what we've been told to be afraid of. We've been told by generations of anti-nuclear activists to build up in our minds this into such a fearful monster that we have to reject it at all costs, even if the cost might be a habitable climate. Now, I'm not afraid of it. Do you know what I see when I look at it? I see another 10 billion megawatt hours of electricity because that fuel is just waiting to be recycled and reused in a fast reactor. Out in the desert in Idaho are the Argonne National Laboratories. You can see the experimental breeder reactor 2. There's the reactor building, and directly attached to it is the fuel recycling facility. Now, with this system, the integral fast reactor, spent nuclear fuel can be formed into metal fuel, run through a fast reactor, completely cleaned and recycled. So all of that spent nuclear fuel, like we just saw in Connecticut, only 1% of the energy has been realised from that fuel. This technology was worked out in around about 1994, and fortunately it's now commercially available through General Electric Hitachi as the PRISM reactor, and it's actively competing to help the UK begin dismantling its stockpile of plutonium in the best possible way by giving us clean electricity at the same time. So the so-called nuclear waste we have sitting in places like Connecticut, in that we have the most staggeringly large quantity of clean fuel. We've already mined it. Now, you may wonder why I'm so big on the idea of plentiful energy and why I'm so excited about these large numbers. If I had to give you a one-word answer, the answer would probably be Lagos, Africa's largest city and growing fast, with 21 million people in it. It's quite a sight, and it looks very different to Brisbane. In the slums of Lagos, you'll see dirt roads, you won't see any street lights, and I'll leave it to your imagination to think about the sanitation. These people need energy, desperately and in large amounts. And we have to provide it cleanly, because if Nigeria develops an electricity system that at all resembles Australia's, the climate change fight is as good as lost. So plentiful, clean energy is what we want. Now, we might like to think we can do that with renewables. Let's visit the largest onshore wind farm outside of China, which is in the United States. Here at the Alta Wind Farm, we have about 1,320 megawatts of wind turbines. The peak capacity at 1,320 megawatts is about the same as those two very small nuclear power stations that we first visited in China. However, that peak capacity is only available sometimes. The overall capacity factor will be about 30%, whereas the capacity factors for the Qinshan plants are about 95%. So we would only expect about 1/3 the amount of electricity, and the nature of that supply will be variable. It also requires large windy areas that are going to be a long way from where people live. So if we zoom out and have a closer look at this, we can get an idea of the sort of size that it takes to provide 1,320 megawatts of wind power. And it's 13 kilometres squared of the best windy territory to give us 3.5 million megawatt hours of electricity per year. I'm a supporter of renewable energy. I don't necessarily think this is a bad thing. Am I prepared to bet the climate on it? No. Am I prepared to bet the provision of reliable electricity for people who need it on it? No. No, I'm not. What about solar? The Ivanpah Solar Power Station, again in the Mojave Desert in California. It was commissioned not 12 months ago. It was expected to produce about 1 million megawatt hours per year. Based on the 8 months of operation to date, it's on track to produce 1/3 that amount. These haven't been technical teething problems. The reason it is providing 1/3 the amount is because it was not as sunny as expected. That is the risk in building a 100% renewable energy system based on climatic systems. Sometimes it's not going to be as sunny as expected. And you're going to need a lot of backup to provide cover for that. It doesn't matter what type it is, that adds cost. 14 kilometres squared. $80 million spent relocating an endangered species, the desert tortoise of the Mojave. Now, I'm willing to bet that would have been a showstopper if we wanted to put a uranium mine there. We need lots of energy. It all needs to come without greenhouse gas emissions as quickly as possible. We need dense fuel so that it can be close to people and that it can serve them in all climates and in all terrains. And if it's compact, if the mining is compact, or if preferably there's no mining at all, we leave more space for our wilderness. And in a world that's getting more and more crowded, that's how we need to start thinking. So let's now visit Ontario. When we add together the Pickering and the Darlington nuclear power stations, you can see Darlington in the background of Pickering. These power stations are providing 45 million megawatt hours per year to Canadians. Beautiful clean electricity every year, rain, shine or snow. 13 million people in Ontario, comparable to the eastern seaboard of Australia. Looks like a good place. I wonder what their electricity is. If Brisbane's at 820 grams, if our national electricity market is at 1,000 grams, what's Ontario's? They tell us with a live web app, 44 grams. Exactly what our climate scientists, exactly what the IPCC is telling us we need to achieve globally, worldwide, within the range of 50 grams per kilowatt hour. That's reality right now in Ontario. For 13.5 million Ontarians living high energy, developed nation lives, just like we do, 44 grams. I like that they leave that up there, just to remind us, because they burned their last bit of coal last year and they're never going to burn coal again in Ontario. A sensible mix of nuclear and renewable technologies has decarbonised. And that's what we need. Dealing with climate change is a great challenge, but it's not a riddle. We know what to do and we have the evidence for doing it. We know how to eliminate coal quickly, and we do that with nuclear power. And we can achieve everything else, a great functioning network with a sensible mix of nuclear power, renewable technologies, and demand management and energy efficiency. But it seems like the pain of changing Australia's identity in relation to nuclear power, we have more fear about making that change than even the fear that we're supposed to have about climate change. Australia's prohibition on nuclear power is more than just hypocrisy, it is an out-and-out climate crime. We need nuclear power. Australia's place in this climate changing world is to use nuclear power and to help other nations use more of it. Climate change, nuclear energy, urbanisation, wilderness preservation, these are global issues. And we have a responsibility to apply a global perspective. Thank you very much. Electricity is not just a product, it's a service. And part of the service is reliability, not trying to get fish to ride bicycles. We've got to use the technologies according to their strengths. These low-cost renewables, these variable renewables have real strengths and we should use them. We mustn't delude ourselves about what they can and can't do for us.